The massive space station floated in the darkness between three solar systems. Its metal walls stretched for miles in every direction. Lights blinked along its surface like tiny stars. This was Kepler Station Academy, the most important school in the galaxy. Inside the station, strange beings walked through wide hallways. Some had blue skin and 4 arms. Others looked like walking crystals that sparkled in the light. A few had scales like snakes but walked on 2 legs. They all carried books and tablets talking in different languages that sounded like music or clicks or hums. Marcus Chen felt very small as he walked down the main hallway. He was the only human on the entire station. His brown hair and normal clothes made him stand out among all the alien students. Everyone stared at him as he passed. Some pointed and whispered to their friends. "Look, it's the primitive one," he heard a student say in broken English. Marcus kept walking. He had come here as part of a new program between Earth and the Galactic Educational Consortium. Earth had just joined the galactic community 6 months ago. The alien governments wanted to learn about humans, so they invited one student to come study at their best school. Marcus thought it would be exciting. He was wrong. The other students treated him like he was stupid. They laughed when he ate normal food from Earth. They made jokes about human technology being so simple. Even the teachers seemed to think humans were not very smart. His first class was xenobiology, which meant studying different alien life forms. The teacher was Professor Crixtal, a tall blue alien with large black eyes and no nose. He wore fancy robes covered in symbols that meant he was very important. Marcus walked into the classroom and found his seat in the back. The other students filled the room quickly. There were about 50 of them, all different types of aliens. They chatted in their various languages while waiting for class to start. Professor Crixtal walked to the front of the room. His voice was deep and smooth when he spoke in perfect English. Today we continue our study of primitive species and their basic survival methods. As you know, we have a special guest with us this term. All eyes turned to Marcus. He felt his face get hot with embarrassment. The human specimen will help us understand how lower species manage to survive with such simple methods, the professor continued. Today we will examine primitive consumption habits. Marcus wanted to leave, but he stayed in his seat. He had promised Earth's government that he would learn as much as possible and represent humanity well. The professor turned on a large screen at the front of the room. Pictures of different foods appeared on it. There were fruits from the Vexani homeworld that glowed like lamps. Strange meat from Saurok hunting grounds that moved by itself. Liquid foods from the luminal dimension that looked like flowing light. These are examples of advanced nutrition from civilized worlds, Professor Crixtal explained. Each food is carefully designed to provide maximum nutrition with minimum waste. The preparation methods require advanced technology and deep scientific understanding. The alien students nodded and took notes on their tablets. Then the screen changed. Pictures of Earth foods appeared. Pizza with melted cheese, hamburgers with lettuce and tomatoes, fried chicken in golden coating, ice cream in colorful flavors, the classroom filled with laughter and disgusted sounds. And these, Professor Crixtal said with a smile that looked mean, are examples of primitive consumption habits. Notice the crude preparation methods, the wasteful combinations of ingredients, the complete lack of scientific understanding. A Vexani student raised her crystal hand. "Professor, why do they mix so many random things together?" "Excellent question, Zeralin," the professor replied. "Primitive species have not yet learned to separate nutrition from pleasure. They eat based on simple taste preferences rather than scientific need." More laughter filled the room. Marcus felt angry but tried not to show it. A large Saurok student with green scales spoke up. "My father says humans are barely smarter than the animals on their planet." "Your father is wise, Sektar." Professor Crixtal nodded. "Humans have only recently learned to travel between stars. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours." Marcus gripped his tablet tighter. These aliens knew nothing about human history or culture. They only saw the simple things and ignored everything else. The professor continued his lecture. "The most concerning aspect of human consumption habits is their tendency to consume harmful substances for pleasure. They drink liquids that poison their nervous system. They eat plants that cause pain. They seem to enjoy damaging their own bodies." The screen showed pictures of people eating spicy food. Their faces were red and tears ran down their cheeks, but they were smiling and laughing. This behavior suggests a serious lack of evolutionary development, the professor explained. Civilized species avoid pain. Humans seem to seek it out. Sektar raised his clawed hand. Professor, is it true that humans eat things that would kill other species? Indeed, Professor Krikstal replied. Human digestive systems are remarkably crude. They can process many toxic substances that would hospitalize more evolved beings. However, this is not a sign of strength. It simply shows how primitive their biology remains. The class laughed again. Marcus felt his hands shake with anger. Professor Krikstal walked over to a metal cabinet at the side of the room. He pressed his hand against a security pad and it opened with a hiss. Inside were dozens of containers holding different specimens. He pulled out one small container with warning labels all over it. Inside was a single red pepper, no bigger than Marcus's thumb. This, the professor announced, holding up the container, is what humans call a Carolina Reaper pepper. It contains massive amounts of a chemical called capsaicin. This chemical activates pain receptors in most species. For civilized beings, even touching this plant could cause severe injury. The alien students stared at the tiny pepper with amazement and disgust. Yet humans, the professor continued, consume these regularly for entertainment. They hold contests to see who can eat the most. They laugh while tears stream down their faces from the pain. That's impossible, whispered a luminal student whose body glowed soft purple. I assure you it is true, Professor Krikstal replied. This single pepper contains enough capsaicin to send most of you to the medical bay. Humans eat dozens of them. Marcus had eaten Carolina Reapers before. His uncle grew them in his garden back on Earth. They were hot but not dangerous. Marcus even enjoyed them on pizza sometimes. This demonstrates the vast difference between primitive and advanced species, the professor concluded. We have evolved beyond the need to endure pain for pleasure. Humans have not. The bell rang, ending the class. Students packed up their things and filed out of the room. Many of them looked at Marcus with expressions of disgust or pity as they passed. Sektar stopped at Marcus's desk. The big Sarok student towered over him with sharp teeth showing in a mean smile. Must be embarrassing, Sektar said in his hissing voice. To know your entire species is considered primitive by everyone in the galaxy. Marcus looked up at him. We're not primitive. We're just different. Sektar laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Different? You eat poison for fun. You destroy your bodies with toxic substances. That's not different. That's stupid. He walked away, still laughing. Other alien students followed him, whispering and pointing at Marcus. Marcus sat alone in the empty classroom. Professor Krikstal was putting the pepper container back in the security cabinet. The warning labels seemed to glow under the bright lights. Marcus thought about home. About his family's restaurant where they served spicy food to happy customers. About summer barbecues where everyone ate hot peppers and laughed together. About all the amazing foods from different human cultures around the world. These aliens knew nothing about humanity. They saw only what they wanted to see. They called humans primitive, but they were the ones who seemed afraid of everything. Marcus made a decision. He would show them what humans were really like. He would prove that being different didn't mean being weak or stupid. He just needed the right opportunity. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus arrived at Kepler Station Academy. Each day brought new embarrassment and mockery from the alien students. They called him the primitive or dirt dweller when they thought he couldn't hear. Even worse, some of the teachers seemed to encourage this behavior. Today was different. Professor Krikstal had announced a special public lecture in the main auditorium. The topic was Primitive Dietary Limitations, a Case Study in Evolutionary Failure. Marcus knew he would be the main subject of this presentation. The auditorium was huge. It could hold over 1,000 beings, and today it was completely full. Students from all levels had come to see the show. Even some teachers and visiting scientists filled the upper levels. The lights dimmed as Professor Krikstal walked onto the stage. Marcus sat in the front row as instructed. He felt like an animal in a zoo with everyone staring at him. The professor had told him his presence was educational for the other students. Welcome, colleagues and students, Professor Krikstal began. His voice carried clearly through the auditorium's speakers. Today we examine one of the most interesting cases in our ongoing study of primitive species development. A large holographic display appeared above the stage. It showed a rotating image of Earth, blue and green and beautiful. Some students in the audience made sounds of disgust at seeing the primitive world. The planet Earth, the professor continued, represents an early stage of planetary evolution. Its dominant species, humans, have only recently achieved basic space travel. Their society, culture, and biology all show clear signs of underdevelopment. Marcus gritted his teeth but stayed quiet. He had been warned not to interrupt during the presentation. The hologram changed to show images of human cities, then human families, then human food preparation. The audience laughed at pictures of kitchens and restaurants. Notice the crude methods of food preparation, Professor Crickstall pointed out. Humans use fire to cook their food, just like their primitive ancestors. They have not developed the molecular reconstruction techniques used by civilized species. A Vexani student in the audience called out, "Professor, why don't they eat nutrition pods like normal beings?" "Excellent question," the professor replied. Humans are still driven by basic animal instincts. They choose food based on primitive taste preferences rather than nutritional science. This leads to many inefficiencies and health problems. The hologram showed pictures of different human foods. Pizza with cheese melting off the sides, hamburgers stacked high with vegetables and sauces, bowls of pasta covered in rich red tomato sauce, ice cream sundaes with whipped cream and cherries. The alien students made sounds of confusion and disgust. To them, this food looked messy and unscientific. These crude mixtures waste enormous amounts of energy, Professor Crickstall explained. A single human meal often contains hundreds of different chemicals mixed together randomly. Advanced species learned long ago to separate nutrition from pleasure. Sektar, the large Saurok student, raised his hand. "Professor, is it true that humans actually enjoy the process of eating these messy combinations?" "Sadly, yes," the professor nodded. "Humans spend hours each day in the primitive ritual of consumption. They gather in groups to eat together. They even use eating as a form of social bonding. This behavior is similar to what we see in herd animals on undeveloped worlds." Marcus felt his face burn with anger. These aliens understood nothing about human culture. They saw family dinners and celebrations as primitive behavior. They missed the love, the community, the joy that came with sharing food. The hologram changed again. Now it showed pictures of people eating spicy food. Their faces were red and sweating. Tears ran down their cheeks, but they were smiling and laughing. "This brings us to the most disturbing aspect of human dietary habits," Professor Crickstall announced. "Their consumption of pain-inducing substances for pleasure." The audience fell silent. This was clearly the part they had all come to see. Humans regularly consume chemicals that cause severe pain in their mouths and digestive systems, the professor continued. They call these substances spicy food, and they seem to enjoy the suffering these chemicals cause. The hologram showed close-up images of different peppers. Small green ones, medium orange ones, and large red ones that looked dangerous even in pictures. These plant specimens contain a chemical called capsaicin, Professor Crickstall explained. This chemical evolved as a defense mechanism to prevent animals from eating the plants. Most intelligent species recognize this as a clear warning signal and avoid such plants entirely. A luminal student whose body glowed soft blue spoke up. "But humans ignore the warning and eat them anyway?" "Not only do they eat them," the professor replied, "they seem to enjoy them more when they cause greater pain. They rate these peppers on a scale based on how much suffering they produce." The hologram showed a chart with different peppers arranged from mild to extremely hot. At the top of the chart was a small red pepper labeled Carolina Reaper, 2.2 million Scoville units. "This specimen," Professor Crickstall said, pointing to the Carolina Reaper, "represents the peak of human masochistic consumption. It contains enough capsaicin to hospitalize most civilized species. Yet humans eat these regularly in competitions." The audience gasped and whispered among themselves. The idea of eating something that painful on purpose seemed impossible to them. Professor Crickstall walked to the side of the stage where a security cabinet waited. He pressed his hand to the scanner and it opened with a soft hiss. Inside, protected by a force field, sat a single Carolina Reaper pepper. He lifted the containment unit carefully, as if it held a dangerous explosive. The pepper inside looked small and innocent, but the warning labels covering the container told a different story. "This actual specimen was obtained from Earth for our research," the professor announced. "It is kept under containment protocols due to its toxic nature. Even the air around it could cause respiratory distress in sensitive species." The alien students leaned forward in their seats, staring at the tiny pepper with fascination and horror. Scans show that this single pepper contains enough capsaicin to trigger severe pain responses in 97% of known galactic species. Professor Crickstall continued. Contact with skin would cause chemical burns. Consumption would require immediate medical intervention. Marcus looked at the pepper and almost laughed. It looked exactly like the ones his uncle grew back home. He had eaten dozens of them over the years. They were hot, sure, but not dangerous. His uncle put them in salsa and gave jars away to neighbors. Yet humans, the professor said, his voice full of disgust, consume these toxic plants for entertainment. They hold contests to see who can eat the most. They add them to their food for extra flavor. They even feed them to their children. The audience made sounds of shock and revulsion. Some students covered their mouths as if they might be sick. This behavior demonstrates the vast evolutionary gap between humans and civilized species, Professor Crickstall concluded. We have developed beyond the need to inflict pain upon ourselves. Humans have not. Sektar stood up in his seat. His large frame and green scales made him impossible to ignore. Professor, he called out, I bet the human couldn't even touch that poison pod without protection, let alone eat it. The auditorium erupted in excited chatter. All eyes turned to Marcus, who felt his heart start beating faster. Professor Crickstall smiled, showing his sharp teeth. An interesting hypothesis, Sektar. What do you think, human? Could you even handle being in the same room as this pepper without protective gear? Marcus stood up slowly. The auditorium fell silent. Over 1,000 alien beings watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to disgust to anticipation. I could do more than that, Marcus said quietly. Excuse me? Professor Crickstall asked, leaning forward. Marcus spoke louder. I said I could do more than just touch it. Sektar laughed, a sound like grinding stone. You're saying you could actually eat that poison? Without dying? Marcus looked at the Carolina Reaper in its containment field. It reminded him of summer afternoons in his uncle's garden, of family barbecues where everyone tried to handle the heat, of the pride in his uncle's voice when he talked about growing the hottest peppers in the neighborhood. Yes, Marcus said simply. I could eat it. The auditorium exploded in noise. Students shouted questions and challenges. Some laughed at what they thought was human stupidity. Others seemed genuinely curious if it was possible. Professor Crickstall raised his hands for silence. When the noise died down, he spoke with obvious amusement. You realize, human, that consuming this specimen would likely result in severe injury or death? No, Marcus replied. It wouldn't. Sektar jumped up from his seat. Prove it, then. If humans are so tough, show us. Other students joined in. Do it. Show us how primitive you are. Eat the poison! Marcus looked around the auditorium at all the alien faces staring at him. They expected him to back down. They thought he was just making empty boasts like a frightened animal. Fine, Marcus said. I'll do it. The auditorium fell completely silent. Professor Crickstall stared at Marcus with surprise. Even Sektar seemed shocked that the human had actually accepted the challenge. You're serious? The professor asked. Completely serious, Marcus replied. But I want everyone here to watch. And I want the... News of the challenge spread through Kepler Station Academy like wildfire. Within hours, every student, teacher, and staff member knew that the human exchange student had agreed to eat the Carolina Reaper pepper. The reaction was immediate and intense. Some alien students thought Marcus was lying and would back out at the last minute. Others believed he was simply too stupid to understand the danger. A few wondered if humans might actually be tougher than they appeared. But most agreed on one thing. This would be the most exciting event the Academy had seen in years. Marcus walked through the hallways and noticed how different things were now. Instead of ignoring him or making quiet jokes, students stopped their conversations to stare at him directly. Some whispered urgently to their friends in languages he couldn't understand. Others took pictures of him with their alien devices. Is that really the human who's going to eat poison? He heard a young Vexani student ask her friend. My brother says he'll die within minutes, another replied. Marcus tried to ignore the attention and focus on his regular classes, but it was impossible. Even during lectures about galactic history or mathematics, students kept glancing at him instead of paying attention to their teachers. During lunch period, Marcus sat alone at his usual table in the cafeteria. The alien students had never invited him to join them before, and now they seemed even more separated from him. They gathered in large groups at distant tables, talking quietly and pointing in his direction. He ate his simple human food while surrounded by aliens consuming their advanced nutrition pods and energy drinks. The contrast felt more obvious than ever. His sandwich and apple looked primitive compared to their scientifically perfect meals. "Human," a deep voice said behind him. Marcus turned to see Sektar approaching his table. The large Sorok student was even more impressive up close. His green scales reflected the cafeteria lights, and his yellow eyes seemed to glow with intelligence and cruelty. "Yes?" Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Sektar sat down across from him without being invited. His weight made the chair creak loudly. "I want to make sure you understand what you've agreed to do." "I understand perfectly," Marcus said. "Do you?" Sektar leaned forward, his massive frame blocking out the light above them. "That pepper will cause chemical burns in your mouth. Your throat will swell shut. Your stomach will feel like it's dissolving from the inside. You'll vomit until there's nothing left, and then you'll keep vomiting." Marcus took another bite of his sandwich. "Is that supposed to scare me?" Sektar's eyes narrowed. "My father is Ambassador Thekmar of the Sorok Dominion. He's met humans before during the first contact negotiations. He says your species talks big but runs away when things get dangerous." "Your father doesn't know all humans," Marcus replied. "Maybe not," Sektar admitted. "But I know you. You're just a scared little primitive trying to act tough. You'll back out of this challenge before tomorrow's demonstration?" Marcus set down his sandwich and looked directly into Sektar's glowing eyes. "No, I won't." Something in Marcus's voice made Sektar pause. For just a moment, the big alien student looked uncertain. "We'll see," Sektar said finally. He stood up and walked away, but Marcus noticed he looked back twice before leaving the cafeteria. After lunch, Marcus had his regular xenobiology class with Professor Krikstal. The classroom was more crowded than usual. Students who normally skipped class had shown up to get a better look at the human who claimed he could eat poison. Professor Krikstal seemed to be enjoying all the attention. He spent the entire class period talking about the dangers of capsaicin and the various ways it could harm different alien species. "The chemical attacks nerve endings directly," he explained, drawing diagrams on the holographic display. "It triggers the same pain receptors that respond to actual fire. The body cannot tell the difference between capsaicin exposure and being burned alive." The alien students took careful notes, glancing at Marcus frequently as if studying a dangerous animal. "For most species," the professor continued, "even small amounts of capsaicin cause immediate physiological distress. Heart rate increases dramatically, blood pressure spikes. The digestive system attempts to expel the toxin through vomiting." A luminal student raised her glowing hand. "Professor, what happens if someone actually consumes a full Carolina Reaper pepper?" Professor Krikstal smiled coldly. "Medical intervention would be required within minutes. The subject would experience extreme pain, difficulty breathing, possible cardiac stress, and severe digestive trauma. Recovery could take days or weeks, assuming survival." The classroom fell silent. All eyes turned to Marcus, who continued taking notes as if the professor was discussing ordinary mathematics. "Of course," Professor Krikstal added, "this is purely theoretical. No civilized being would ever attempt such a thing." After class, Marcus was approached by Dr. Veltana, the station's chief medical officer. She was a tall, thin alien with silver skin and large compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. "Student Chen," she said in a voice like gentle music, "I need to speak with you about tomorrow's demonstration." "What about it?" Marcus asked. Dr. Veltana looked around to make sure they were alone in the hallway. "I've been reviewing the medical data on capsaicin exposure. What you're planning to do could be extremely dangerous." "I appreciate your concern," Marcus replied, "but I'll be fine." "You don't understand," Dr. Veltana insisted. "I've prepared emergency medical protocols based on what we expect to happen. Stomach pumping, respiratory support, cardiac monitoring. The full trauma response team will be standing by." Marcus stopped walking and looked at her seriously. "Doctor, I've eaten Carolina Reapers before. They're hot, but they won't kill me." Dr. Veltana's compound eyes seemed to shimmer with disbelief. "That's impossible. Our scans show lethal levels of capsaicin in that specimen." "Lethal to you, maybe," Marcus said. "Not to humans." The doctor studied him carefully. "I've read your species' medical files. Human pain tolerance appears to be within normal ranges for mammalian species. There's nothing to suggest you could survive this level of chemical exposure. Then maybe your files are incomplete, Marcus suggested. Dr. Veltana was quiet for a long moment. I'll have the medical team ready regardless. I hope you're right about your species' capabilities, but I won't risk a student's life on hope alone. That evening, Marcus sat in his small dormitory room and sent a message home to Earth. The communication delay meant it would be hours before he received any reply, but he needed to talk to someone who understood. Hi, Uncle Pete, he recorded. I'm about to do something that might make humans look really good or really stupid to the aliens here. Remember those Carolina Reapers you grow in your garden? Well, tomorrow I'm going to eat one in front of about 1,000 alien students who think it will kill me. I know it sounds crazy, but they need to learn that humans aren't as weak as they think we are. Wish me luck. He sent the message and lay down on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Through his small window, he could see other parts of the massive space station. Aliens were going about their normal lives, completely unaware that tomorrow might change how they thought about humanity forever. Marcus wasn't scared of the pepper. He had eaten hotter things before and survived just fine. What worried him was what would happen if he succeeded. Would the aliens finally respect humans, or would they find new ways to call his species primitive? A soft chime indicated he had received a message. Marcus sat up quickly, hoping for a reply from Earth, but it was from someone on the station. The message was from Zarlin, one of the quieter Vexani students from his xenobiology class. Her crystal-like appearance had always made her seem distant and cold. But her message was surprisingly warm. Human Marcus, it read. I wanted you to know that not all students here think badly of your species. Some of us are genuinely curious about human capabilities. Tomorrow's demonstration will be very educational, regardless of the outcome. Please be careful. Marcus smiled for the first time in days. Maybe not all the aliens saw humans as primitive animals. Maybe some of them were actually interested in learning the truth. He spent the rest of the evening preparing for the next day. He meditated like his martial arts teacher had taught him back on Earth. He drank plenty of water and ate a light meal. He even did some exercises to make sure his body was ready for the stress. Most importantly, he thought about why he was doing this. It wasn't just about proving Sektar wrong or showing off for the other students. It was about representing his entire species. Every human back on Earth was counting on him, even if they didn't know it. The aliens at this academy would report back to their governments about what they learned. If Marcus succeeded tomorrow, those reports might describe humans as tougher and more capable than previously thought. If he failed, humans might be seen as weak and foolish for generations. No pressure at all. Marcus finally fell asleep around midnight, but his dreams were filled with images of Carolina Reaper peppers and alien faces staring at him in judgment. Tomorrow would determine whether humans were respected as equals in the galactic community or dismissed as primitive fools who didn't know their own limitations. When he woke up the next morning, Marcus felt ready. He had a simple breakfast and dressed in clean clothes. As he walked through the station hallways toward the auditorium, he noticed that crowds of alien students were already gathering. Some of them pointed the main auditorium had never been so crowded. Every seat was filled with alien students, teachers, researchers, and even some off-duty station personnel. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement and anticipation. Some beings had brought recording devices to capture what they expected to be a spectacular failure. Others whispered among themselves about betting pools on how long the human would last before collapsing. Marcus walked through the crowd toward the front of the auditorium. The noise level dropped as beings noticed him passing. By the time he reached his designated seat in the front row, the entire massive room had fallen silent. Over 1,200 alien eyes focused on him with expressions ranging from curiosity to disgust to barely contained excitement. Professor Krixtal stood on the stage wearing ceremonial robes for the special occasion. Behind him, a large holographic display showed detailed molecular diagrams of capsaicin and its effects on various species. Medical monitoring equipment had been set up around the stage, along with emergency response gear that looked intimidating enough to treat major trauma cases. Dr. Veltana and her medical team occupied a special section near the stage. Marcus could see portable life support systems, chemical neutralization devices, and what appeared to be a full surgical setup. The medical staff watched him with professional concern, clearly expecting the worst. Distinguished colleagues, students and visitors, Professor Krickstall began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium speakers. Today we witness an unprecedented demonstration of primitive behavior versus scientific understanding. The crowd stirred with anticipation. Our human specimen has claimed the ability to consume a Carolina Reaper pepper without suffering the severe physiological damage that would affect any civilized species, the professor continued. This assertion contradicts all known medical data about capsaicin toxicity. Marcus stood up and walked toward the stage. The auditorium fell completely silent except for the soft humming of recording devices and medical equipment. Before we proceed, Professor Krickstall announced, I want all witnesses to understand the extreme nature of what is about to be attempted. This pepper contains over 2 million Scoville units of capsaicin. For comparison, military-grade defense sprays used by security forces contain only half that concentration. A worried murmur ran through the crowd. Some students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus climbed the steps to the stage. Under the bright lights, he felt exposed and vulnerable, but he also felt strangely calm. This wasn't really different from the hot pepper challenges he had done with friends back home, except for the audience of alien beings who expected him to die. The containment unit sat on a table in the center of the stage. Inside the force field, the Carolina Reaper looked small and innocent. Just a wrinkled red pepper about the size of Marcus's thumb. The warning labels covering the container seemed more dangerous than the pepper itself. Student Chen, Professor Krickstall said formally, you may withdraw your challenge at any time. No one will think less of you for recognizing the limitations of your species. Marcus looked out at the sea of alien faces staring back at him. In the front rows, he could see Sektar's yellow eyes glowing with anticipation. The big Sorok student was leaning forward in his seat, clearly expecting to watch Marcus suffer. I'm not withdrawing, Marcus said clearly. Professor Krickstall nodded and pressed several controls on the containment unit. The force field disappeared with a soft whistle of air. Immediately, some aliens in the front rows began coughing and covering their noses. Even the small amount of capsaicin molecules in the air was enough to affect their sensitive respiratory systems. Marcus reached toward the pepper without hesitation. His movement caused several alien students to gasp audibly. Some covered their eyes as if they were about to witness a gruesome accident. The pepper felt normal in Marcus's hand, slightly wrinkled skin, firm but not hard. It even smelled good, like the peppers from his uncle's garden. He could detect the faint scent of capsaicin, but it was familiar and not unpleasant. Final warning, Professor Krickstall announced. Consumption of this specimen will likely result in severe injury requiring immediate medical intervention. Marcus looked directly at Sektar. The Sorok student was practically vibrating with excitement, his scales reflecting the stage lights as he waited for the human to prove himself primitive and weak. No, Marcus said loudly enough for everyone to hear. It won't. Without any further hesitation, Marcus bit into the Carolina Reaper pepper. He chewed it slowly and deliberately, making sure everyone could see what he was doing. The familiar heat began building in his mouth, spreading across his tongue and down his throat. The auditorium was so quiet that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Every alien in the room stared at him with shock and disbelief. Some had their mouths open in expressions of pure amazement. Marcus swallowed the first piece of pepper and took another bite. The heat was definitely building now. His eyes began to water slightly and he could feel sweat starting on his forehead, but these were normal reactions that he had experienced many times before. Impossible, someone whispered in the audience. Marcus finished the first pepper and calmly asked, Do you have another one? Professor Krickstall stared at him with his mouth hanging open. The medical monitoring equipment showed Marcus's elevated heart rate and increased metabolism, but no signs of distress or toxicity. There are more specimens in the laboratory, the professor stammered. Could you get them, please? Marcus asked politely. One pepper isn't really enough to prove anything. Dr. Veltana stood up from her medical station. Student Chen, how are you feeling? Marcus wiped his nose with a tissue and smiled. Hot, but good hot, not bad hot. Like eating spicy food is supposed to feel. The alien medical officer approached the stage with a scanner in her hands. She pointed it at Marcus and watched the readings with obvious confusion. His vital signs are elevated but stable. She announced to the crowd. No signs of toxicity or system failure. Pain receptors are activated but not at dangerous levels. A luminal student in the audience called out, "But how is that possible? The capsaicin should be causing severe damage." Marcus looked out at the crowd of shocked alien faces. "Because humans eat spicy food all the time. We've been eating hot peppers for thousands of years. Our bodies are used to it." Professor Krickstahl seemed to recover from his shock. "Bring more specimens from the laboratory," he ordered an assistant. "We need to determine the human's actual tolerance level." While they waited, Marcus stood on the stage answering questions from the amazed audience. The aliens wanted to know how humans had developed such tolerance to capsaicin. They asked about human agriculture and cooking methods. Some even seemed genuinely interested in learning about human culture for the first time. The assistant returned with a container holding 5 more Carolina Reaper peppers. Professor Krickstahl set them out on the table with shaking hands. "These are all we have available," he said quietly. Marcus picked up the second pepper. By now his mouth was definitely burning and his eyes were watering more noticeably, but he felt fine overall. Actually, he was starting to enjoy the familiar endorphin rush that came with eating really spicy food. He ate the second pepper while the audience watched in stunned silence. Then the third. By the fourth pepper he was sweating visibly and his nose was running, but he was also smiling. "This is actually pretty good," he told the crowd. "Not the hottest I've ever had, but definitely respectable." Sektar stood up in his seat. "That's impossible. You should be unconscious by now." Marcus looked at the big Sorok student while eating the 5th pepper. "Sorry to disappoint you." The medical scanner showed that Marcus's body was working hard to process the capsaicin. His heart rate was elevated, and his metabolism had increased significantly. But all his systems remained stable and functional. Dr. Veltana announced the readings to the crowd. "The human has consumed enough capsaicin to hospitalize dozens of most species. His body is processing it as if it were normal food." Marcus finished the last pepper and asked for a glass of water, not because he was in distress, but because his mouth was getting dry from all the talking and heat. "Is that it?" he asked Professor Krickstahl. "Do you have any hotter peppers?" "These are nice, but I've had spicier food at my local restaurant back home." The professor just stared at him speechlessly. The entire auditorium remained silent except for the soft sounds of recording devices and medical equipment. Finally, Sektar spoke up from the audience. What are you?" Marcus wiped his sweating face with another tissue and smiled. "I'm human. This is what humans can do. We're not primitive. We're not weak. We're just different from you." He looked out at the sea of alien faces all staring at him with new expressions. The mockery and condescension were gone, replaced by something that looked like respect mixed with fear. "Humans have been eating spicy food for thousands of years," Marcus continued. "We drink alcohol that would poison most species. We eat foods that are toxic to other animals. We work in environments that would kill weaker beings, and we do it all because we can." The auditorium remained silent for several long moments, then slowly, Word of Marcus's demonstration spread through Kepler Station Academy, faster than light-speed communications. Within hours, video recordings of the human calmly eating 5 Carolina Reaper peppers were being shared across the entire galactic network. Students who had missed the live demonstration watched in amazement as Marcus consumed what they considered deadly poison while asking for more. The immediate effects were dramatic. Professor Krickstahl canceled his remaining lectures on primitive human limitations. Dr. Veltana requested copies of all human medical data to update her understanding of the species. Even the station commander, Admiral Threxnall, called for a private meeting with Marcus to discuss human capabilities. But the changes went deeper than just academic interest. In the days following the demonstration, Marcus noticed that other students treated him completely differently. Instead of calling him primitive or dirt dweller, they used his actual name. Some even approached him with genuine curiosity about human culture and biology. Zaraline, the quiet Vexani student who had sent him an encouraging message, was one of the first to seek him out. "Marcus," she said, approaching his table in the cafeteria. "May I sit with you?" "Of course," Marcus replied, surprised by the formal politeness in her voice. She settled her crystalline form into the chair across from him. "I wanted to apologize for how our class treated you before. We didn't understand." "It's okay," Marcus said. "You couldn't have known." "But that's exactly the problem," Zaraline insisted. "We made assumptions based on incomplete information. My species prides itself on scientific accuracy, yet we acted like primitive beings ourselves. Marcus was about to respond when more students approached his table. A group of luminals whose bodies glowed different colors surrounded them. "Is it true that humans regularly consume ethanol for recreation?" one of them asked excitedly. "And caffeine as a stimulant?" added another. "We heard you can survive in temperature ranges that would kill most species," said a third. Marcus found himself answering questions about human biology and culture for over an hour. The aliens were genuinely fascinated by things he had never thought were particularly special. The fact that humans could eat chocolate, toxic to many species, amazed them. Learning that humans regularly stayed awake for 16 hours or more shocked them. When he mentioned that some humans could hold their breath underwater for several minutes, they demanded to know if he was joking. "Humans sound incredibly durable," Zarlin observed. "How did your species develop such resistance to toxins in extreme conditions?" Marcus thought about how to explain human evolution and adaptation. "I think it's because Earth is a pretty dangerous place compared to most worlds. We had to adapt or die. Over thousands of years we got tougher." The conversation was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Human." Marcus looked up to see Sektar approaching the table. The large Sarok student looked different somehow. Less arrogant, more uncertain. "Sektar," Marcus acknowledged. The other alien students made room as the imposing figure sat down. Sektar was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "I was wrong about your species." Marcus was surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you. My father contacted me after seeing the demonstration recordings," Sektar continued. "He said the Galactic Council is very interested in learning more about human capabilities. Apparently there are discussions about revising first contact protocols." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. Sektar's yellow eyes met his. "When species are first evaluated for galactic membership, they're classified based on their perceived threat level and technological advancement. Humans were classified as harmless primitives based on your recent technological development." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But species that can casually consume deadly toxins for entertainment might need to be reclassified." The implications of this hit Marcus immediately. Earth's status in the galactic community could change dramatically based on what happened at this academy. Over the following days, Marcus received messages from Earth. His uncle Pete sent a video congratulating him on showing those aliens what real peppers taste like. The Earth government sent official communications requesting detailed reports on everything he had learned. But the most significant message came from Admiral Threxnell himself, requesting that Marcus attend a formal meeting with representatives from multiple galactic governments. The meeting took place in the station's diplomatic conference room. Marcus had never seen anything so impressive. The circular chamber had holographic displays showing star charts and alien worlds. Representatives from 12 different species sat around a massive table, each wearing elaborate clothing that indicated their high rank. Admiral Threxnell, a tall being with blue-gray skin and 4 arms, stood to address the group. "We are here to discuss the recent revelations about human biological capabilities and their implications for galactic security." Marcus felt nervous as all eyes turned to him. These beings held the power to determine humanity's place in the galaxy. "Student Chen," the Admiral continued, "your demonstration has raised important questions. We need to understand the full extent of human resilience." Ambassador Kethvar of the Luminal Collective leaned forward. Her glowing form pulsed with curiosity. "Is it true that humans can consume substances that are lethal to most known species?" "Some substances, yes," Marcus replied carefully. "But we're not invulnerable. We just have different tolerances than other species." "Different how?" asked Ambassador Thekmar, Sektar's father. The senior Sarok official looked at Marcus with new respect. Marcus spent the next hour answering detailed questions about human biology, diet, and survival capabilities. He explained how humans could process alcohol, caffeine, capsaicin, and various other compounds that affected aliens differently. He described human endurance, pain tolerance, and adaptability. "Your species consumes dihydrogen monoxide in liquid form?" asked a shocked Vexani representative. "You mean water?" Marcus replied, confused. "Of course. We need it to survive." The aliens exchanged worried glances. Apparently, liquid water was considered a dangerous solvent by several species. As the meeting progressed, Marcus realized that humans were much tougher than he had ever imagined. Things that seemed completely normal to him were extraordinary to these advanced alien civilizations. "There's something else we need to discuss," Admiral Threxnell said finally. "We've received requests from several military organizations." "Military requests?" Marcus asked. Ambassador Thekmar spoke up. "The Sorok Defense Force would like to know if humans would be interested in serving as military advisors. Any species that can casually consume battlefield-grade chemical weapons clearly has valuable tactical insights. The Vexani Republic is interested in human participation. In hazardous environment exploration," added another representative, "and the Luminal Collective would like to discuss human involvement in our toxic waste management programs," Ambassador Kethover added. Marcus realized that everything had changed. Humans were no longer seen as primitive newcomers to be patronized and educated. They were now viewed as incredibly durable beings whose participation could benefit the entire galactic community. "I'll need to discuss this with my government," Marcus said. "Of course," Admiral Threxnell agreed, "but I think it's safe to say that humanity's classification will be upgraded significantly." As the meeting ended, Marcus walked back through the station corridors with a new understanding of his species' place in the galaxy. Students and faculty who passed him nodded respectfully. Some even stepped aside to let him pass as if he were somehow dangerous. That evening, Marcus sat in his room composing a long report to Earth. He tried to explain how eating a few hot peppers had accidentally revealed that humans were among the most biologically resilient species in known space. He described how attitudes toward humanity had shifted from condescending amusement to respectful wariness. The next morning, Marcus received a priority message from Earth's president herself. The message was brief but clear. "Well done, Marcus. Come home. We have work to do." As Marcus prepared to leave Kepler Station Academy, he reflected on how much had changed. He had come here as a representative of a primitive species, seeking acceptance from advanced civilizations. He was leaving as a member of what the galaxy now considered a remarkably tough and potentially dangerous species. His final day at the academy was marked by farewell gatherings with students who had become genuine friends. Even Sektahar shook his hand with what appeared to be sincere respect. "I learned something important from you," the Sorok student said. "Never assume that different means inferior." Professor Crixtel approached him as well. The alien professor looked embarrassed but determined to speak. "Student Chen," he said formally, "I wanted to thank you for correcting my misconceptions. I will be revising my entire curriculum based on what I learned from your demonstration. I hope you'll teach students to be more curious about other species," Marcus replied, "and less quick to judge them." As Marcus's transport prepared to depart for Earth, he looked back at Kepler Station Academy through the viewport. The massive station looked the same as when he had arrived, but everything else had changed. Humanity was no longer the galaxy's newest and most primitive member species.